Hello everyone and welcome back to Martin's Movie Corner. My name's Nathaniel Martin and today we're going to be discussing two things. One, a movie I saw very recently called Skinamarink. This is a Canadian experimental horror film. I guess it came out in a limited theatrical release recently, but it has been produced as a Shudder original. Also today, we're going to be going down the streaming service tier list. I'd like to make a tier list at the start of 2023 to kind of stake a claim in what I believe are the best and the worst streaming services that are currently available. But before we get carried away making tier lists, let's talk about the movies. Kyle Edward Ball's directorial feature film, Skinamarink, came out this weekend in a limited release, and I had the opportunity of seeing it at a local AMC here in New York. I thought that this film, from its trailer and from its marketing, seemed right up my alley. It looked like one of those backrooms videos, one of those cursed videos you see on the internet, and that's kind of exactly what we got. This film was very, very unique, and because of that, I don't necessarily think it's going to land with mainstream audiences, but people that are a fan of cult classic horror films are probably going to really dig this one. The movie starts, two children wake up in the middle of the night and notice that their front door is gone and that their parents are nowhere to be seen. This continues in a loop of kids wandering halls late at night and watching the television, which is just playing royalty-free, public domain cartoons from the 30s. And I thought that this was a really unique presentation and a really interesting setup. The whole movie feels like one long nightmare. If I have to give this movie any points, it's definitely for creativity. I think with its surrealist visuals and its nightmarish, feverish qualities, it definitely feels like you're watching someone else's nightmare come to screen. However, just like a nightmare, there isn't a whole lot to really tie you to reality. So if you come into this movie and start asking a whole bunch of questions, they're not going to get answered. You're never going to know where the parents went or really what's going on. This movie did provide a lot of really, really tense scares. Now, there's not really any major actors or performances in this movie. The two children that are the main characters of this movie, you never see their full face. The film is shot with a bunch of very interesting kind of B-roll close-ups on items in the house. Whether it's the top left corner of the television or a pile of Legos on the floor, you're never once focused on the people in the situation, and I think that that adds to that cursed kind of nightmarish quality. Now, for a 100-minute runtime, it is a little exhausting. I did find the pace running a little long, but this movie was really exciting. To see a YouTuber get the opportunity to make a feature film with a budget of only $15,000, it was quite amazing the technical achievements that were made here. There were some stylistic choices, however, that didn't quite work for me. I thought the digital film grain added to the movie, which at times was creative and helped provide different setups for scares, kind of bogged down the really well-composed cinematography. There was a couple of elements that I just felt had too many digital artifacts on them, and especially when you're looking down dark hallways over and over again, your imagination starts to play tricks on you on what's moving in the background with the film grain, and while this added to the scare, in general, it did make it kind of straining on the eyes. I think that if this movie was about 10 to 20 minutes shorter, it would play a lot better. At least upon a first viewing, I felt like it dragged. But this is also the type of movie that I would love to watch in the comfort of my own home. I think the fear of being home alone and kind of placing yourself 1 degree closer to these kids in this situation who are home alone would actually make it more scary than a theatrical experience. That being said, there were a lot of people in my theater that were covering their eyes or were visibly nervous, I being one of them. I thought this film built tension in a very unique way, as you were anticipating a scare, but you didn't know if it was going to be more of a psychological scare or a jump scare. And this movie does do a great job of blending the two. Upon a first watch, I decided to give Skinamarink a 3 out of 5 stars. I thought that this was a perfect 3-star horror movie. It left little to be desired in terms of questions and figuring out what's going on. This isn't a mystery, this is a nightmare. And I appreciated it for that. I think maybe upon a subsequent rewatch, this might move up to a 3.5 or maybe even a 4-star movie. Just off my first viewing alone, I was a little underwhelmed by the ending, and I feel like it could have built to something bigger, but That being said, I did really enjoy the atmosphere of this movie and the visual presentation. Skinamarink, definitely check it out if you're a fan of horror movies, but you can catch it on Shudder very soon if it's not playing at a theater near you. To segue, Shudder is one of the streaming services I'll be talking about in my tier list today. I think it's really unique that Shudder is taking this experimental approach to releasing an experimental horror movie. So without further ado, we're going to jump into this streaming catalog tier list. Now, I don't use every streaming service, and I do prioritize movies over TV shows. So this isn't going to be a perfect tier list, but this is one that I would recommend to the viewers of my show who are also movie fanatics, which ones to check out, which ones to subscribe to if you aren't already. Up first, we've got AMC Plus. Now, AMC Plus is a subscription service that I've never used. However, I did have friends that were using this when Better Call Saul was doing its final season mid last year. And I would say that the user interface of this application didn't look particularly user-friendly. And I also thought that unless you're a super big fan of Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul, both shows which you can also watch on Netflix, there's not really a ton there. There's some cool behind the scenes and documentary stuff. But yeah, you gotta be like a big fan of The Walking Dead if you're into this. I know they have 3 Walking Dead spin-offs coming there sometime in the next year or so. So if you're really into The Walking Dead, I guess AMC Plus is for you, but for me, there just isn't any content on there I'm dying to see, and it is mostly television, if I'm not mistaken. I think that this is more of like an add-on, kind of like some of the other ones we'll get into, where it's like, if you have Amazon or Hulu already, you can get AMC Plus as an add-on. So I'm gonna put this in D tier for, it's pretty much DLC tier. Up next is Crunchyroll. Crunchyroll is an anime streaming service, and to the dismay of popular belief, I'm not much of an anime watcher, so Crunchyroll probably doesn't align with what I watch, but I will say it does seem like they have a pretty big catalog. My friends that I know that use Crunchyroll, they never run out of things to watch. I mean, some of those shows are 400 or 500 episodes long, so it seems like they've got a decent catalog for a niche market that is growing. I mean, look at movies that are coming out in theaters now. It seems like every few months there's a limited release or a big theatrical event for an anime movie or a feature film based off of an anime. So I'd put this in B tier. It seems like they've capitalized on a niche and know how to make content for that market. So yeah, I'm gonna give Crunchyroll B, even though I've never used it, sorry. Up next, this one's popular. I think everyone's used it at this point, is Disney Plus. Now, like I said, I'm not much of a series guy, so when Marvel started making all of these series, I didn't really keep up with them. That being said, I did watch the first season of Mandalorian, so I know there's interesting content coming out there. If you're a big Star Wars fan or you're a big Marvel fan, it seems like Disney Plus knows that they have these big intellectual properties that they can make a weekly show around. I haven't been blown away by any of them that I've seen. I've seen about an episode or 2 of everything, and none of it really like grabbed my attention, was like, this is must-see television. But what Disney does have going for them is their back catalog of, hundreds of movies that have released over the past, 80 to 90 years of cinema and television history. So there is definitely a big amount of content there. I will say, whenever together with the family, it's probably one of the first streaming services I check out. I think over the summer, me and my cousins watched Cheaper by the Dozen and Cheaper by the Dozen 2 on there. Like, there's good content for a wide amount of people on that platform. I just don't think the original newly released stuff is all that great. There is, Pixar content coming out there. The last few Pixar movies were actually released like directly to there, which I thought was crazy for Luca, because I thought Luca was one of the better Pixar movies of the last couple of years. But yeah, I don't necessarily think that Disney Plus is a bad streaming service. I think it's doing what its fans want it to do, which is create a bunch of content for it. I would put Disney Plus in A tier, I think. Next, we've got ESPN Plus. Now, if you use ESPN Plus, you're probably a big sports person. And while I tune into sports, especially if it's at a bar or a restaurant that I'm at, I would consider myself somewhat of a sports fan. I'm not a diehard enough sports fan to get ESPN Plus by itself, but it is in that bundle with Disney Plus and Hulu, so I know there are quite a few people that probably have it already. I do have to say I love the ESPN 30 for 30 documentaries. I think that those are really fantastic. So I bet you there is enough interesting content on there that I'd probably use it. I just don't currently. Like anime, Crunchyroll, it provides for its audience. I think that if you're a sports fan, ESPN Plus is probably a must. So I'll give it the B tier as well, just over Crunchyroll. Up next, we've got HBO Max. Now, this is a streaming service that I fear for. They just had a big merger with Discovery, or Discovery Plus. So now Discovery Plus and HBO Max are one. And this is a little bit concerning because I think that we've already started to see a bit of a shift in HBO Max's quality in terms of the content that's on there. They've gotten rid of recently a lot of premium TV shows that HBO used to have on its network. I'm a big fan of the show Vinyl. I didn't grow up in a household that had an HBO subscription, so what you do get on HBO Max is like the past 2 decades of groundbreaking television. You can watch The Sopranos, you can watch The Wire, you can watch shows like Vinyl and Westworld. Well, now you can't necessarily watch all of those shows. Some of those shows are being pulled from the service as we speak. However, another thing that's in the favor of Discovery, HBO, is that they work with Warner Brothers. And so in 2021, every single week, Warner Brothers was putting out a movie onto HBO Max, and I thought that that was great. Because of that, they have a great back catalog as well. I believe recently I watched a couple of movies on HBO Max from a few years ago. And I think like HBO Max has this great pool of previously made content. They've got a couple of originals that are coming out that are popular, whether it be White Lotus or things like that. But for the way it seems, it looks like almost all of Warner Brothers movies go to that streaming service. So you have Oscar contenders this year like Elvis and The Banshees of Inisherin that are able to be watched in people's homes well before the Academy Awards on HBO. The way it stands right now, HBO Max is the best streaming service for watching movies, which I know sounds crazy, but it is. However, I don't know if that'll last through this year. So as of now, I'm putting HBO Max in S tier. I think that they are currently the best one. That being said, I don't know how long that's gonna last. Up next, we've got Hulu. Hulu's been around almost as long as Netflix, and it seems like they were, for a long time, number 2 in the game. And then more and more people started entering the streaming service market, whether it be Disney Plus or HBO Max. All these other services are now here to take a little bit of what Netflix has, but Hulu was a contender for a very long time. I think what they did right was getting contracts with TV that was on TV and making sure they had a back catalog of seasons, so it was really great to catch up with what was on cable by using Hulu to catch yourself up. Now it seems like their market has changed quite a bit, like Netflix, where it is a lot more of producing their own content. The last few years, Hulu has done this really great thing around Halloween time in October. They do Huluween, which is like 31 movies, low-budget horror movies or licensed horror movies that get distributed onto Hulu. So that's really fun if you want to, make a habit out of catching up on some horror movies. Hulu had you covered in October, and I think that was really neat. However, in the long term, I don't really know what Hulu has in terms of originals that are like really stand out, grab your attention TV. I did watch a show that was on there earlier this year called Bear, and it was all about these like cooks working in a kitchen, and it was very stressful, and it was a really good show. I don't normally watch a lot of TV, and that was one that I actually caught this year. So I think that Hulu is probably trying to find its footing similarly to Netflix, but I would give Hulu an A. I think it makes sense that they're bundled with Disney Plus. It looks like Hulu has a slightly more adult demographic, even though Disney is now playing like R-rated movies and things like that on their platform. So who knows? It's kind of a good catch-22 that they're blended together in a bundle. But I don't know if Hulu's gonna stand on its own for too much longer. Alrighty, and here we have the Criterion channel. Now, if you're a fan of movies or a fan of like prestige cinema, you've probably heard of the Criterion Collection. They put out really high quality like restorations, 4K Blu-ray releases of like the canon's most beloved films. I think that the Criterion channel is a really unique streaming service in that it has a curated like collection of movies that go out at a time, and usually on like a month to 6 week cycle, they transfer them out. I think that this is actually a really smart model for them, because one thing that they do a very good job of is keeping that fresh. I recently watched Barry Lyndon on there, and then they had a really cool featurette that was like a behind the scenes and making of, which like would be like a DVD extra that they'd include if you bought that, but you got both just on the streaming service alone. I don't currently have a physical media collection, but because of the Criterion channel, I actually want to start building one because their library is so great. Thank you, my friends Jake and McKenna, for getting me a Criterion channel subscription, because it's already starting to pay off. I've already watched like 4 or 5 things on there. And if you are a fan of prestige cinema, I think it's the streaming service most valuable. You kind of have to check in on it every few weeks to see if there's anything that new that you want to catch. Another really cool thing about the Criterion channel is if you are starting your physical media collection, which they try to nurture, and you do want to make Criterion collection purchases, they'll actually send you a bunch of promos, like buy one, get one half off, or buy 2, get a 3rd free, coupons to your email. So it really does feel like when you sign up for the subscription service, you're welcomed into a bigger world of Blu-ray, DVD collecting. I think it makes them a unique streaming experience. I'm gonna put them in B tier as well. I just think that I'm part of that niche, so I have more appreciation for it. Up next, Netflix, the biggest of them all, or at least it was until recently. It's kind of disputed. It seems like Netflix is losing a lot of money on their originals, without the lucrative contracts that they had in the past to have a collection of new releases and buzzed about movies, they're kind of in a murky area now. But the one thing I will say about Netflix is they've continued to output original television that people talk about. I'm not the biggest Stranger Things fan. I've never seen a whole season all the way through, but Stranger Things season 4 last year was a huge cultural moment. I felt like everyone was talking about that for the entire beginning of the summer. I almost reviewed today, alongside everything else, The Pale Blue Eye, which is a new Christian Bale movie that came out straight to Netflix. If you want to hear my thoughts on The Pale Blue Eye, I guess leave a comment and I can talk about it next week. Really, if you're looking into what actors are on the rise, look at who has Netflix contracts, because I feel like every year or every other year, there's a breakout performance from a show. And I think like Jenna Ortega this year on Wednesday is going to become a household name. I think I wasn't really familiar with her until I saw her in X earlier this year, and now back to back, she's had 2 big projects in the span of only a year, and I think Netflix has a big part to do with that. One thing they keep trying to do is like reality TV, and as like Discovery Plus is merging with HBO, and so like HGTV and TLC and all that stuff is going to be going on to HBO's library, I think Netflix is soon going to try to pull away from what the kind of like reality TV thing is there, and I think they're just going to continue focusing on narrative content. And I think that Netflix is probably in a better spot now than people were thinking earlier, over the past year. I think Netflix has continued to find their audience. I would say that Netflix is also an A tier. I would actually put them above Disney Plus, because Netflix is something you want to keep checking in on, because there's always new releases that people are talking about. Oh boy, up next we've got Paramount Plus. Now Paramount Plus is a streaming service that I've never really owned. I feel like it's got a really weird blend of content being released onto it. So if I'm gathering this correctly, they do have Paramount's tentpole releases. So like Top Gun Maverick was their biggest movie this year by a lot, and now that's the streaming service where that resides. So if you want to watch Top Gun Maverick at home, you're best off getting a Paramount Plus subscription. They also have licenses with like Nickelodeon and things like that. So they've got like the iCarly reboot on Paramount Plus. They had an original SpongeBob movie not that long ago. They also have like 6 or 7 Star Trek shows in production right now. I think they had a Twilight Zone reboot as well. I just don't think that there's a ton of original content on there. Oh, unless you're a Yellowstone fan. If you are a diehard fan of the Taylor Sheridan television cinematic universe, which would include Yellowstone and 1929 or 1899 or whatever that is, or the Tulsa King. Yeah, Paramount Plus, I don't necessarily know who the target demographic is. It just seems like it's the streaming service for people that have still been watching television for the past 4 years. So that might be the one for you guys. I think Paramount Plus is going to be the first C-tier network. I think it's kind of crazy that they're expecting everyone to jump ship from wherever they were watching Yellowstone before to have to get Paramount Plus to watch Yellowstone season 5. I know I'm gonna get a bunch of phone calls from extended family asking me what the hell Paramount Plus is. It's gonna be a nightmare, but yeah, Paramount Plus is C. Up next, Peacock. Now Peacock, I feel very similar. I feel like they have an interesting distribution. They have some movies that come out pretty quickly. The most recent movie I can think of was Halloween Ends, which got put out on Paramount like a month after it was released in theaters. I feel like Peacock is the definition of, I didn't know that streaming services were a thing until this was the only way I could watch the TV show that I was watching. And whenever someone tells me something's on Peacock, I kind of just like scoff. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. They also are like giving this subscription service away. I think it's like $5 a month or something still, which is kind of crazy, as like even Netflix is raising its prices. Disney Plus is raising its prices. HBO Max is raising its prices. Like everyone's going up to like the $12 to $15 range. And like Peacock's like, we're $5. What more can we ask? If you like shows that are in the sphere of NBC and what they have rights to broadcast, then you're probably gonna subscribe to this no matter what. So my opinion on it really doesn't matter, but I think that they are also C tier with Paramount Plus. I don't know anyone who would like go out of their way to get Peacock. Up next, Apple TV Plus. Now I have really mixed feelings about Apple TV Plus because they do have a couple of decent originals. Another TV show I caught over this past year that I was like kind of glued to is Severance. I thought that this was a really unique show. And so when I was using my Apple TV Plus free trial, I was like, wow, Severance is on here and Coda's on here, the best picture of last year. But yeah, beyond like those two things, I found that Apple TV Plus had a severe lack of content, and they like hide it with like iTunes rentals. It reminds me of what like Amazon used to do like 10 years ago, where it's like, oh, we've got some original content, but also like, oh, if you want to watch this, it's gonna be $5 or it's gonna be $3. As someone who doesn't watch TV shows off of iTunes, I just feel like this isn't really a convenient streaming service. Now they are continuing to produce original content, and so far I've liked some of it. Their user interface is very deceiving. It's very confusing if you are trying to set it up at your like uncle's house to watch Charlie Brown Christmas or something, and then, you know, they're like, oh, Elf's on here too, we don't have to switch to HBO Max. So then your uncle tries to watch Elf on Apple TV Plus and is like, why is it $4? And I'm like, no, switch to HBO. Trust me, it's for free on there. And then you get to HBO and you realize they don't have it anymore. Streaming services are complicated. This isn't 2012 anymore. It's you know, it's a real knife fight. I think Apple TV Plus is even worse than Paramount Plus and Peacock. I think it's currently like, it's just deceiving how poorly set up it is. And I hope that they continue to put out really good originals, because I would love to get back into Apple TV Plus, but currently what they have just isn't enough to warrant however much it is a month. Up next, we've got Prime Video. Prime Video has been around for quite a while now, probably almost a decade if I were not mistaken. And what I like about Prime Video is its originals are really high quality. I'm a big fan of The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. Really liked The Boys, at least the first 2 seasons of it. I haven't seen season 3 yet. But there was like decent high quality originals on there. I know people were a really big fan of like Jack Ryan's series. Like, it's got original content there. I feel like a lot of it's in TV, so I don't know most of it off the top of my head, but they also do put out original movies every now and again. It's clear to see like what's rentable and what's streamable, which I like. Feel like Prime, just the bare bones version of it, you're kind of missing out on some content like Hulu. So you kind of need add-ons. You need the filler, the DLCs, so to speak. So I think Prime Video's kind of held back. I think Amazon's a little bit better than Hulu, so I'm gonna put it in an A tier as well. All right, up next we've got Showtime. Showtime is a really great streaming service if you're trying to watch David Lynch's Twin Peaks: The Return. Other than that, I know nothing about Showtime. I have only used Showtime add-on free trials. It is the definition of a DLC streaming service, just like AMC Plus. If you're a big fan of some of the original Showtime content, it is a must. But if you don't know any of that and you don't necessarily care, I know a ton of people that use it as an add-on for either Hulu or Prime Video. So I think Showtime is going just directly into the DLC tier. I will say Twin Peaks: The Return is the best thing that's come out on television since Breaking Bad. So, I mean, yeah, it's gotta be higher than AMC Plus. And back to the main topic of today's episode, Shudder. I think Shudder is a fantastic original streaming service. They have a niche. Their niche is horror movies, specifically like B movies and horror movies. And I think that they have a great curation of classics. They've got a bunch of like 80s cult classic films. They've got like The Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. They got Killer Clowns from Outer Space. If you just want to, throw on something for 90 minutes that has some, scares and chills, then it's perfect. They also have like a live TV channel thing where if you don't really care what you're watching, you just want to throw something on, they will just autoplay a movie and you can watch that live. And that's honestly a fun feature that I'd like to see incorporated on other streaming services. And this year they did a really good kind of talking heads type like documentary series on like the 101 best jump scares or scariest moments in movies. And it was captivating. I was checking in on that every single week, waiting to see the next list of 10 or 11 movies that were being featured on the show, and then watching one of them, and then watching that show the next week. And it was honestly a lot of fun. It made my October really special this past year. So I think Shudder does that kind of niche streaming service thing the best out of all the other ones between ESPN Plus, Crunchyroll, and even the Criterion channel. I think that they really knock it out of the park. And I definitely recommend checking out Shudder. If you haven't already, I would start a subscription. The next release that they have that interests you, if that's Skinamarink, then definitely try the free trial and you'll probably be hooked. Even if you only check on it a couple times a month, there's almost always something there to check out. And I think Shudder is definitely worth, I think it's like $45 for a year, so it's a lot cheaper than most of these streaming services. So I recommend checking out Shudder. Final one is, spoiler alert, another DLC streaming service. This is Starz. There's been a couple times where I want to watch Mulholland Drive, and then like I go onto HBO and it's like available with the Starz add-on, and I'm like, okay, whatever. Or I'll go into Amazon and it'll be like available with Starz, and I'm like, okay, well, okay, I'm just not using it. So I feel like this is another one of those like AMC Plus, like Showtime. If you're into the Starz original content, you kind of need it, but otherwise, I mean, it's just gonna be like, oh, you wanna watch, a 2007 movie? Well, you're gonna need the Starz add-on. So then it's like, okay, how many times do I see this? Is it worth buying the add-on subscription, which I think is like $6 a month or something, but I'm gonna put it, somewhere between Showtime and AMC Plus. I don't know too many people that go out of their way for Starz like that. Well, that about does it for this week on Martin's Movie Corner. Thank you for sticking around and watching me talk about Skinamarink and also the streaming service tier list. I don't think HBO Max will stay at the top of this for long, but what are your thoughts below? Did I do any streaming services disservices? Are you a Peacock stan? Let me know in the comment section below. Be sure to subscribe to the Duel of the Takes YouTube channel if you haven't already. There's tons of great content on here, an archive of our previous podcast, as well as weekly episodes of Martin's Movie Corner coming to you. What should I talk about next week on Martin's Movie Corner? Should I talk about The Pale Blue Eye? Are there any new releases you're dying to hear about? Comment below to let me know.